Oh, my goodness. Husker news just keeps on rolling. We got more news for you, more announcements coming up.
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. DP, Derrick, Pearson, 92.7 Lincoln, America, right here in the heart of the country, the home of the Fighting Huskers, University of Nebraska. I have lots to talk to you about today, and I want to thank you for making Locked On Huskers, Locked On Go Big Red, your first watch, listen each and every single day. I want to thank the folks from Omaha Steaks. Yum. OmahaSteaks.com. If you go through, and again, there's a minimum order required, but for tender, juicy steaks, for the best burgers, delicious desserts, go through OmahaSteaks.com. And as a gift for being a part of this, for the nation that is Locked On Husker Nation, you get $30 off, minimum order required, if you just use the code Locked On. Locked On. It's the holiday. You've got people in mind. Think about it. You have people in mind right now that would love some juicy steaks, some wonderful burgers over the holidays. Do it. Do it. You're thinking about it. You know who it is? Do it. Like Tim deserves it. Steve deserves it. Like, do it. Don't worry about it. I want to thank you for subscribing, getting alerts. If you haven't, go ahead and do so now. I'll wait. You can put down in the comment section, you know what? I've subscribed, done it. I'm getting this each and every single day. Click the button. Give me a thumbs up. That'll let me know that you did just that. The news today is breaking, and that's a part of what we do here. How about that? Getting an announcement from Keith Mann through Nebraska football head coach Matt Rhule, and it goes as follows. He's officially added a pair of assistant coaches to his Nebraska coaching staff. Tony White will serve as the Huskers defensive coordinator, while Donovan Raiola will be the Nebraska's offensive line coach. White's hire is pending completion of a background check, while Raiola, because of his second year at Nebraska, that's not necessary. We're pleased to add Tony White and Donovan Raiola to our coaching staff. Rhule said they each bring a high level of energy and competitiveness to our staff. Both Tony and Donovan were outstanding players at the highest level of college football. We also have professional playing experience, and that success is carried on to their respective coaching careers. I look at them both. Forward to them both developing the players in our program and helping them bring the nation's top talent to Nebraska. White joins the Huskers after spending 3 seasons as defensive coordinator at Syracuse. In his time with the Orange, White helped transform Syracuse defense into one of the top units in the Atlantic Coast Conference. White led Syracuse to back-to-back top 30 defensive efforts in 2021 and 22, marking the school's best defensive efforts in a decade. The Orange allowed 330 yards a game in 2021 to rank 19th nationally and second in the ACC. This season, the Syracuse defense ranked 29th nationally, allowing 338 yards a game, helping Syracuse to a trip to the Pinstripe Bowl. In addition to the top 30 ranking defense this season, White's defense ranked in the top 35 nationally in passing yards allowed. They were 19th. Yards per play, 21st. And scoring defense, 35th. And sacks, 35th as well. The defensive unit accounted for 3 defensive touchdowns and helped Syracuse rank 23rd nationally in turnover margin. White spent the previous 2 seasons at Arizona State, primarily working with the secondary. He helped the Sun Devils climb 50 spots in the NCAA defense rankings. He also coordinated the ASU defense to a victory in the 2019 Sun Bowl. White spent 9 seasons at San Diego State from 2019 to 2017. And during that time, the Aztecs went to 8 bowl games and won 3 Mountain West Conference titles, 2012, 2015, 2016. White also has experience at New Mexico and UCLA, played collegiately at UCLA, had a 4-year career in the Canadian Football League. Raiola will continue on the Nebraska staff after serving as the offensive line coach in 2022. Of course, Raiola was a tenacious competitor, offensive lineman, 3-time All-Big Ten selection at Wisconsin, and spent time in the NFL. So as that becomes official, it allows us to now have some other different conversations. We'll go back, and throughout the course of this podcast, we're going to talk about a couple of things. We'll go back into the transfer portal, what that means. We'll talk about, the security check and the timing, the things that have to happen in that space. And then some, there was some additional news in the transfer portal today from Nebraska. And we'll get through all of that throughout the course of this podcast. But speaking specifically of what White's announcement means and what Raiola's announcement means. Now, there are folks in Husker Nation familiar with Raiola. There are those, and this is kind of, if you want to define Nebraska fan base, there's a third that loves it. There's a third that doesn't love it. And then there's a third that sits in the middle. And then whatever side they choose is kind of what the marching narrative is. And they wait to see, okay, let's ponder this a little bit. Let's be reasonable. We're not in the utopia. We're not in Pollyannaville. We're also not in negative Nedville either. They sit sort of in the middle. And with Raiola's announcement and making it official, there are those that immediately went to, well, the offensive line was part of the problem a year ago. How do you, or why do you bring him back? Now, the thing as a coach, and most of my coaching career was being brought into spaces where change was needed, or a thing needs to be added to what already exists. And when I was brought in, the first evaluation is the talent. It's the talent. The second evaluation is the scheme. Are we asking said talent to do things that they are capable of doing or capable of learning to do those things? Right? Walking into and finding out the football IQ in the space that I was going to coach in was the first thing I needed to do. And I would go look at film, and I would look at the schemes, down and distance, situational play calling, and find out, with the talent that's there, am I asking a giraffe to be a rhino? Am I asking a bulldog to face a hippopotamus? You have to put it in perspective. And Raiola didn't have much control or much time with the talent that existed in the offensive line group at the University of Nebraska. Is 1 year enough? Generally not, because as a famous coach once said, if I'm going to make the meals, I probably should be allowed to pick the groceries. I should be allowed to buy the groceries. Raiola hadn't had a chance to buy the groceries. And we're still not sure what groceries we need, because we don't know what the menu is going to be. That's an offensive coordinator. That's a head coach. And those things still haven't been disclosed. But in their thoughts, as Matt Rhule makes the decision, he's landed firmly on the fact that Raiola could get them not only in the schemes that they need and the mentality, the brand, and the plan that they need, but then to be able to teach and coach this group to be Big Ten elite level. And I'm going to keep using that on this podcast from this point forward. Big Ten elite. It's not. It can't be in the Nebraska brand or plan to be basic in the Big Ten. That's not why you go and spend $9 million a year to be basic. The standard has to be Big Ten elite. And firmly, we all know when it comes to football, you need to be in the space that is Ohio State, Michigan. We'll throw it to break. We'll come back. More of what's required of the two new signee coaches, the two announced coaches, here on Locked On Huskers. Welcome back to Locked On Huskers. Thank you very much for hanging out. Greatly appreciate it once again. We ask a lot of questions because, quite frankly, at this point, questions is what we have. I want to thank the folks from Omaha Steaks. This is good. It's through the holidays. You're coming up with ideas, and you know the people that you want to give gifts for. Then you need to match up that person with the gifts that matter. And if you go to omahasteaks.com, they've got plenty for you to choose from. Sometimes the gift will pick its recipient. So go to omahasteaks.com. And remember, before you check out, click in Locked On. You get $30 off. There's a minimum order required. It'll let you know that on the website. But dessert, steaks, burgers, prepared meals, packages where you can put together large numbers for families or just for your single friends. Don't exclude your single friends. They need your help. Once again, subscribe, like, share. Please do that. We were talking about Tony White and Coach Raiola, Donovan Raiola, and the process for assembling your staff. And if you talk about Matt Rhule at all, you talk brand and plan, because those are the first two things that he works for and works from. We still haven't heard much past the announcement day of what the brand and plan are going to be. Now, you get some idea in the coaching staff that's being assembled around him, because those people have brands and plans as well. And so you try to match up what they do with what needs to be done here. Now, also remember, Matt Rhule 2 weeks ago was not an expert on the roster that is Nebraska football. Like he said so himself, that I've got to learn to get to know the players. I'm still not sure to this point that he's talked to every player. I don't know. I can't speak for him. But what I would say is, in picking Raiola, you're that cosigns with the physical brand that Matt Rhule spoke about. Raiola is known as a tenacious player, fiery coach, passionate, extremely knowledgeable. But he's going to have to teach a group of players. And listen, there are some base level folks. Teddy Prohaska is a name. Nuri is a name. Benhart is a name. Corcoran is a name that you would kind of say, okay, this is kind of the level that we're working at, because those are the returning guys in that space. And then, is that standard good enough for what Matt Rhule and the fan base and the administration at the University of Nebraska wants, expects, and demands at that position to compete and be elite in the Big Ten Conference? Because that definition matters. Like that GPS and that identification, like the big thing about GPS, it's going to ask you, where are you trying to go? And then where are you now? Because that's going to dictate how you get there and how to get there efficiently, effectively, and productively. So where you are is, the statement might be fair, and you can correct me, put it in the comments whether you think this offensive line group is Big Ten elite. I'll wait, because that's one to think about. And then if they aren't, can you get the people you need to in the system that Rhule wants to run, right? And the scheme that he wants to run, can you get those players to Lincoln, Nebraska with some quickness? Because you're going to have to, they're going to have to acclimate themselves. They're going to have to get acclimated to Lincoln. They're going to get acclimated to the University of Nebraska, to the fan base, to the building, to the location, the community, all those things. Then they've got to get acclimated to a group of coaches who are getting acclimated as well. I mean, Coach Raiola is the one returning coach that can tell you where everything is, how things work. And remember, he was the most recent of signees to the old staff. He was here for a year, but he's familiar with Lincoln and the University of Nebraska. So then I ask, how do you get two levels of depth chart at the offensive line, in the offensive line group? Who gets to choose them? Where are you getting them from? In this day of transfer portal and NIL, how are you going to pay for them? Who's going to pay for them? Oh, and by the way, buckle up, folks. Buckle up. How are you with a new NIL coalition, replacing an old one, a not-for-profit one being pushed to the side and a for-profit one pushed aside, put into play. With a new coach that you just signed and a new coaching staff who is charged with recruiting basically a new roster from position 1 to position 155 to walk-ons. Who's determining what the NIL budget is, how it's going to be distributed, who's in charge of that, what players are going to be pitched and sold? Because remember, the coaching staff can't engage in that. They can't tell the coalition who to pitch. That's not how this works. That's against the rules. And you're short on clock, and you're behind the schedule. There's a lot in play in this offseason. I'm just letting you know, this is not a quick snap your finger magically, and this thing's going to be pieced together, and it's going to work at the level that you want it to work. Because you've got players who are returning that you have to evaluate and determine whether they're going to be brought back or not. Can they elevate to the level that you need to be at? And remember, none of the players are at the elite level that you want to be at because you have 0 returning Big Ten, all Big Ten performers, first team. There's some second team and honorable mention, but you don't have any that were the elites. You have some pretty goods, right? But those pretty goods are, what, 5? 5 players that got all Big Ten, second, third team honorable mention, somewhere in that space. Those are the people that the next level of Nebraska football have to meet, match, and exceed. And then everybody you bring in has to meet, match, and exceed that. And then everybody that's brought in that you evaluate from a transfer portal talent base has to be above what you have, because you can't bring in everybody who's below what you already have. Ponder that for a second. Then you can't bring in anybody. And you've got to look at all 1,000 people who are in the transfer portal and identify people who are more talented than what you have, that fit the character, that fit the integrity, that fit the academic side, can handle the community, be a part of the social engagement that is being a part of a Power 5 elite football program. Oh, and by the way, they've got to fit what Matt Rhule and these new coaches want. It takes a lot. Just telling you, it's not that easy, but at least you have announcements. We'll talk about the other side of this. Tony White, what it means. We'll close out Locked On Huskers. Welcome back. Locked On Huskers, greatly appreciated. Thank you for hanging out with us each and every single day and making Locked On Huskers a part of your day. Greatly appreciated. I do recognize that there are just tons of podcasts out there, but you know what? You folks have chosen to not only subscribe, but to show up and participate and be a part of this podcast. Greatly appreciated. Again, Omaha Steaks, the world's best beef, naturally aged for ultimate tenderness, juiciness, and flavor. Has everything you need to deliver an incredible holiday experience. Just think, the people that you want to put a smile on their face. Well, Omaha Steaks is the way to do it. Every steak is an entree, is flash frozen, vacuum sealed, ready to share with the family or their friends. Every steak, every entree is backed by one unconditional 100% money back guarantee. Go to omahasteaks.com. $30 off, minimum order required. Again, the announcement. There were 2 announcements today, and we're thrilled with this. Of course, the announcement that Jimari Butler, who said he was going to jump into the transfer portal, has said, you know what, I'm jumping back out. It's best. I've talked to my family. I've talked to the coaches. It would be best for me to stay at the University of Nebraska. So bravo, Jimari, another ed setter that you can build around. Maybe the announcement of Tony White and a conversation between Tony White and Jimari Butler. Maybe they met somewhere in the middle and made this thing happen. But this is part of what has to happen for Tony White, that he has to gather a collection of minds. He has to reset the standard. He has to meet with Matt Rhule and go over exactly what is acceptable and what isn't, what's allowed and what is not. from a returning roster where there is some talent. Garrett Nelson, of course, being the standard for returning Huskers, and literally the standard for all Big Ten. That Garrett Nelson will tell you he wants to and has to be better than he was a year ago. And Garrett Nelson was a helmet and hair above every other defender on the Huskers this year. So Jimari Butler will have to do more. O'Shawn Mathis is still a question in that space. Ty Robinson is on the roster. Does he return? Colton Feast has the capability and the opportunity to come back. We don't know how that's going to play out. Guys who got minutes up front. Stephon Wynn, has the ability to come back. But this is the thing. If they come back, is that the level that you want to play at in the Big Ten Conference next season? Or do they have to get better? And then if you're going to recruit and you're going to have transfers come in, they have to be better. And I'm just going to ask you, off the top of your head, with 57 defensive linemen in the transfer portal, how many of them are better than what you have, fits the system, doesn't require NIL deals that will break the bank or at least make you uncomfortable, can handle the academic load, can deal with the pressures of changing and being in a new system, under a new coach, under a new coordinator, under a new head coach? Linebacker position, Heinrich and Reimerslick. If we got a lineup tomorrow and those guys are there, Nebraska feels pretty good. The Big Ten Conference understands that there's going to be competent play there. Is that good enough? Ernest Hausman in the transfer portal. Can you get him? He was seen in Iowa at a basketball game last night, hanging out with folks in the transfer portal. Do you have the chance to get him back? Can you replace him? Don't know. And we know that the linebacker position, University of Nebraska, and the style of play that Tony White's going to bring in, we know that we have questions about whether these players fit, whether they'll be able to assimilate to what he wants done. Can they transfer over that in intellect and knowledge of playing in the Big Ten to what he's going to require? There'll be a new head coach in that room as a leader of the linebacker group, a new coordinator, and a new head coach. Lots of questions, but that's the beauty of it. We'll keep fighting for answers. We'll keep digging. We'll keep spinning the wheel. We'll keep having the conversation. Again, comments down in the box. We'll get to them. We appreciate you. We want to thank you for hanging out with us. I guess we'll talk to you next time here. Locked On Huskers. Finish with the 3 words we love so much. Go Big Red.